Hey YouTube, it's Rebecca Michael back with another video. And so just to introduce this, this is all about triangulation. Now this is a hallmark of narcissistic abuse and psychopaths. It is something they use very regularly when they are trying to get their own way about something. Anyway, it's a major sign of a manipulator, a deceitful and toxic person. So I'm going to try to get through this faster. What it is about really is manufacturing rivalries for the purpose of self-gain, and they often do so as false victims or heroes of their stories. And that's what they are, stories. Anyway, they go about this by recruiting flying monkeys to serve as enemy allies against an abused target, the actual abused target, to do the narc's bidding and dirty work. For example, pitting friends or exes or family members against one another. These are known as secondary supplies if they are being used at the time. Also strangers. They'll go to strangers if they are estranged or whatever and they don't really have other adequate supply for the time being. And the reasons they do this is usually it's smear campaigns that they're engaging in to avoid accountability and responsibility, personal responsibility for the abuse they've just done. So they'll put that back on scapegoats or a scapegoat in order to target, recycle, or secure new supply. By recycle, I mean target former abused targets that they've shelved, quite possibly for years, while they've absolutely desecrated them all, and then they will retarget them because they have a use for them again. They do it also for duper's delight. I talked about this in the last video on pathological lying because they're pathological liars. They do it to secure secondary or new primary supply, or like I said, recycle exes or family members that they've discarded. And I'll get into their con bond stages in another video, but there's 4 stages to that. But it's called the con bond or the psychopathic bond. It's not real. It's parasitic and it's predatory, and the purpose of it is for usury or exploitation of some kind. So they target people for some use at the time, but they have an abuse cycle they go through. They also do this duper's delight I described in the last video. It gives them a sense of superiority to know something you don't. So they lie by omission a lot in order to sell their false victim stories and appeal to the empathy in other people they're recruiting as flying monkeys against the real victims or victim. They also do it to power down the actual abused target. They're trying to manage down the abused target in order to get abuse by proxy by as many people as possible that don't know what's going on. So flying monkeys are usually often unwitting dupes of the narc and used to abuse by proxy the actual victim. when they are the abusers. And they're chronic abusers because you can see this in their track record. As they age out, you'll see a whole list of important estranged people who have been used, abused, and manipulated and discarded and recycled, and just around that abuse cycle, who are fed up with them. Some of them have gone low to no contact as a result, which is a smart thing to do. And so, as I've described in previous videos, chronic abusers are pathological liars. They have pathological envy, and that leads to malice and abuse towards the target, including their own spouse. They'll envy their own spouse. So you're sleeping with the enemy, and I'll do a different video about that later. So what to do about this? Well, it's a huge red flag if there's any ex-bashing whatsoever. If your gut starts going off, listen to it and start going about the business of vetting everything they say and do. If your gut's going off, it means you don't trust them. And there's holes in their story. Things aren't adding up. There's incongruencies in their behavior, isn't consistent with their words. This all points to the possibility that you're involved with a pathological liar and chronic abuser, and they're lying to you about that. And if you don't get out, you may be the next target or a transient target they're using for now and discard or shelve you for later use, to hoover you back later, to recycle you. If they get low on supply or they have a use for you again. So it's a huge red flag to see like estrangements and things like that of important family members and failed relationships and things like this. These are all huge red flags, and you need to start doing some investigation here. If things aren't adding up. So if you find that things aren't adding up and the vetting isn't, when you're vetting things against other sources of information, exes, family, things like that, friends that they've discarded, for example, used and discarded, these are all vetting, or often they'll have criminal records, things like that. I mean, a history of domestic violence, things like that. And they'll maybe claim to be the victim of that, but that's they'll just have a whole bunch of things that aren't adding up here. They'll have all of these things at once as they age out. So you need to pay attention to that, because those are all huge red flags. And if that's what's happening, you need a safety plan exit ASAP, as soon as possible, because there's no cure for pathology. And that's what this is. This is hardwired into the brain. There's a study called Liar's Brain. They can tell if someone's a chronic or pathological liar, habitual liar. This shows up eventually in the brain scans. I've got that posted at Facebook if you want to take a look at that. Some ways down my page by now, but not too far. Anyway, there's no cure for pathology. There's some superficial behavioral mod things that they, if they get treatment. But what shouldn't be happening is targeting other people with this whole list of casualties they've already got. So targeting new people or recycling targets, this is just going to be more of the same. because it's pathological. They need to at the very least go into a treatment program, not target other people. That's my point. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for now. Thanks for listening.